So here's the scene. A reporter approaches a small Indian boy, maybe 10 or 11 years old. He shoves a mic in the kid's face, and he says, "Long live Pakistan, yes or no?" And the boy says, "Zindabad," which I understand means, yes, long live. The reporter says, "Aren't you ashamed?" The boy says, "Why should I be ashamed?" The reporter says, "Long live India, yes or no?" And the boy says, "Yes." "But long live Pakistan, yes or no?" says the reporter. And the boy says, "Yes. Long live everyone in their own home. And you too, may you live long." The reporter, a grown-up, says, "Aren't you even a little bit ashamed that despite living in India, you are supporting Pakistan? Why shouldn't Pakistan be destroyed?" And the little boy answers, "Aren't you ashamed? Making this news about Hindus and Muslims and spreading it everywhere? Everyone is human. Why kill everyone? Tell me, everyone has the right to live. Why destroy them?" Some of you saw this interview. I have to admit, I watched it over and over and over again. I couldn't take my eyes off this kid. He just knows what's right and wrong. He just knows. Now, at the heart of Parashat Behar, as you've heard this morning, is the mitzvah of Schmita, the commandment to let the land lie fallow every 7th year. No reaping, no sowing, no plowing. But immediately, the Torah raises the obvious question, Ma nuchal b'shana hashvi'it? Well, what then are we supposed to eat in the 7th year? This is an extremely reasonable question. The Torah is intuiting our fear of relinquishing control, our fear of living in the unknown. And it seems that the practice of Schmita is in some way designed to build our muscles for the spiritual discipline of surrendering to uncertainty and at the same time living, trusting in what we do know for certain. In this case, the case of the Shemitah, what we do know is God's love and care. I feel profoundly uncertain about the future. And every day, I'm more and more aware of what I don't know anymore. But in the spirit of a small boy in India who knows what he knows, I want to share with you today 4 things that I do know. Number 1, there is no justification for terror. 2 young people were murdered this week as they walked out of a Jewish event, an event celebrating Jewish heritage and culture. Sarah, 26, was a Jew from Kansas. Sharon, her soon-to-be fiancé, was a German and Israeli citizen. They were on their way to Jerusalem this weekend, as you've heard, where Sharon had planned to propose. Not that the shooter knew any of this, a man so outraged by the killing of innocents that he procured a gun and went out to kill more innocents. There is no justification ever for terror. There is no just cause that justifies murder, or for the record, rape or abduction. The fact that this is a point of contention today is a shameful reflection of the moral deterioration of our time. That this is not among the shared assumptions of those who consider themselves advocates for freedom and dignity is both astonishing and utterly terrifying. A harbinger, I fear, of dark days to come. One of the young people who was murdered on Wednesday night was a diplomat. The other was a peace builder. Maybe by now you've read a little bit about Sarah's involvement in Tech to Peace, one of the many initiatives bringing Israelis and Palestinians together in the service of thickening relationships that will ultimately form the foundation of a just and peaceful future. The very night that they were murdered, Sarah and Sharon were hearing from speakers working to deliver urgent, life-saving aid to Gaza. That fact is, as Sarah's father said, a tragic irony. Just as it was a tragic irony that among Hamas's victims on October 7th were so many peace builders, people like Vivian Silver, who dedicated her life to working for peace with Israeli, Palestinian, and Bedouin women. Just as it was a tragic irony that Oded Lifshitz, at 83 years old, was murdered in captivity. As his wife Yochevet, also a peace builder, said at his funeral, "To my sorrow, we were hit by a terrible blow by those we helped on the other side." There is a particular shock and horror to the death of peace builders. But I want to be very clear that the death of any innocent, no matter their political or ideological position, is a moral catastrophe. The fact of their goodness just makes this story feel even more devastating, because Vivian and Oded had spent their entire lives planting the seeds for a better future. And Sarah and Sharon sound like precisely the kind of people who were stepping up to work the field, so that one day the fruits of those efforts could be harvested. One thing I know in this world of so many unknowns, there is no justification for terror. Here's another thing I know. Number 2, anti-Semitism is racism. That is not complicated. Instead of reporting that 2 young people were murdered in an anti-Semitic attack, the headlines immediately blasted 2 Israeli embassy staffers were killed. And yes, it's true that Sarah and Sharon both worked at the embassy, but the Israeli embassy is located 5 miles away from the museum where they were shot. And there's no indication that the murderer had any idea where these 2 people worked. He went to the Jewish museum that night to hunt Jews. Any Jews. It could have been any one of us. As Emma Green so perfectly put it in her piece in The New Yorker yesterday, the gunman spoke in the language of anti-Zionism, but he acted with the logic of anti-Semitism, which has as its foundational myth that all Jews are collectively to blame for the policies of the Israeli government, and often enough for all of the ills of the world. That gunman and so many of his defenders on social media collapsed the space between opposition to the politics of a nation state and violent hatred of a particular people. And there is a word for that kind of generalizing. It is racism. And we who care about building a just society would do well to remember that you cannot fight racism while justifying racist acts of violence. There's no carve-out in building a multiracial democracy, no vision of a just future that protects everyone but the Jews. Now, I don't know a lot, but I do know this. There is only a short distance between racist language and racist violence, between violent rhetoric and violent action. We have seen this with devastating frequency over the past couple of decades in this country. The lethal combination of vicious, inciting, racist rhetoric and easy access to firearms, a uniquely American formula that endangers every single one of our lives. So please don't tell me that bring the war home or globalize the Intifada is a call to nonviolent civil disobedience in the service of collective liberation. Calling a boy who wears a kippah walking across campus a baby killer is not a liberatory act. There is an obvious and direct line from this rhetoric to the firebomb at the governor's mansion on the eve of Passover, and to 2 murdered young people on 3rd Street Northwest in Washington, D.C. And yet, how confused so many good people have become in our time. There is no courage in murder. Not at Mother Emanuel, not at the Tree of Life, not at Sandy Hook, and not here. If you don't see that, you are not a human rights activist, you are a fraud. If you cannot unequivocally condemn the murder of Jews, you are not anti-racist, anti-war, or anti-genocide. You are simply anti-Semitic. I do not know a lot, but this I know. There is no violent path to peace. There is no violent path to liberation. Violence only leads to more heartache, to more anguish, and to more violence. Now, here's another thing I know. Number 3, we must not allow the dehumanization of Jews to justify in our hearts, in our minds, or in our policies the dehumanization of others. After the murders, I spent an hour on the phone with a friend, a Palestinian from Gaza, a true voice for peace. He's been living in the States now for 20 years, but his family is still in Gaza, and more than 30 of them have been killed in this terrible war. I asked my friend what he was hearing from the social media spaces that I choose to avoid. How are people reacting to these murders? He said most of the responses from online activists fell into one of 2 camps. 1, denial. This is a false flag operation orchestrated by the Mossad to distract from the starvation campaign in Gaza. Or 2, celebration, a la the stunning achievement statements of October 7th, which made some of the professors at my kids' university a household name. That makes my heart ache, and I recognize it as a familiar ache. It reminds me of the double shot of anguish that I felt after October 7th, when in the midst of so much grief, so many people I love failed the most basic moral test. They failed to call me and ask me if my brother and his family were alive. But please, can we not be honest here? Have many in the Jewish community not adopted the very behaviors of those who keep hurting us? Have we not shut our own hearts to the anguished cries of the Palestinian people? We are so pained by the denialism employed in the service of diminishing Jewish trauma. Are we not guilty of the same? I don't know a lot, but I do know this. If you are outraged by the conflation of Israel with every Jew, but you insist that there are no innocents in Gaza, then you are guilty of conflating every Palestinian with Hamas. I know this. If you are spending your time debunking exaggerated numbers of casualties from the Hamas-run health ministry, rather than fighting for an end to all casualties, rather than supporting the clarion call of the families of the hostages for an immediate end to war, for the return of the hostages, for resumption of serious talks about a just future, then you have only become a mirror image of precisely what you fear and detest most in this world. And here's something else I know. Number 4, we must not look away. The world is harsh and unforgiving. The enemies of the Jewish people are less inhibited, more empowered, and thanks to social media, more networked. I cannot speak for them, but I can speak to us. I can remind us who we are and what matters most to us. So I can tell you that our Jewish tradition calls us not only to love our own, but to love and care for the stranger. And that means especially those who are most vulnerable, those who are in gravest danger. I can tell you that core to our faith is the moral mandate to protect human life, to treat every single person as an image of the Holy One, precious, unique, and worthy of love. I can remind you that central to our tradition is a collective commitment to the preservation of human dignity and the protection of the possibility of human thriving. All of that was true before Wednesday night, when 2 young people stepped out into the DC night and were murdered. And all of that remains true today. The reason that the event that Sarah and Yaron attended that night focused on IsraAid's coordination of humanitarian efforts for civilians in Gaza is because the situation in Gaza is truly dire. And with each passing day, that situation only worsens. For nearly 12 weeks now, more than 2 million people in Gaza have been cut off from food, from clean water, from medical care. 2 million people awaken each morning asking their own version of our Torah's ma nochal. What then will we eat? And their continued suffering is unconscionable and has passed the point of crisis, even as limited aid began to trickle in over the past couple of days. Immediately after the shooting Wednesday night, the accusations started, and they went beyond pointing out the obvious challenges of delivering food to families without enriching Hamas, whose gunmen have become adept at intercepting aid to the detriment of the Palestinian people. Self-serving Israeli politicians pointed fingers at world leaders who insist on talking about those hungry children, at libelous aid organizations whose sloppiness and obsessive focus on Gaza must mean that Israel is free and clear of any and all responsibility. They're all a bunch of anti-Semites. Oh, and don't get me started on the liberal rabbis. I never want, God forbid, to speak in a way that will endanger someone's life. And yet we all know that there comes a time when not speaking is endangering people's lives. The protests of Israel's right-wing government ministers notwithstanding, we must continue to speak clearly and unequivocally to the suffering in Gaza. The dehumanization of the Palestinian people is a betrayal of our history and our core humanity. Endless war, starvation, and mass destruction are perversions of core principles of our faith. And I don't care how many rabbis hechsher this ghastly policy of deprivation. We must be very clear that the deliberate blocking of aid from civilians is a chilul Hashem. It is a desecration of God's name. It doesn't make any of us safer. Actually, it endangers every single one of us. Just before these murders, I was working with a team at the New Israel Fund to help relaunch a robust aid campaign to support trusted partners on the ground, like the World Central Kitchen, who are working tirelessly to deliver food, water, and medicine to those who need it most in Gaza. We had planned to launch that campaign only hours after these murders occurred. It will now launch in the days ahead. There is so much that I don't know about the world today, but here is one thing that I do know. Our tender hearts have been torn apart this week by tragedy, but the actions of extremists must not deter us ever from speaking the truth, from fighting for the good and the right. We must work to protect our Jewish family, eternally yearning for safety and for quiet. And we must redouble our efforts to get humanitarian assistance to the families that are suffering most in Gaza. So I take us back to that little boy, maybe 10 or 11 years old in India, who knows what he knows. After what seems like an endless repartee of, so you support Pakistan? Yes, I do. And you support India? Yes, I do. Are you not Indian? Yes, he says, I am Indian. And you're saying, destroy that country, but wherever people live, he says, they deserve to live. So the reporter asks the boy one final question. I just want to know one small thing. Who taught you all of this? And the little boy answers and says, bro, I have a brain, man. To get through this time of such dangerous, intractable conflict, we have to use our brains, and we have to use our hearts. The Torah gives us the gift of Schmita to remind us how to live in uncertainty by trusting in what we do know. There's so much that I don't know and don't understand about this world, but there are 4 things that I do know. I know that every human life is precious and that murder is never justified. I know that if you don't like racism, you cannot justify anti-Semitism. I know that even the perverse dehumanization of Jews does not give us a pass to dehumanize others. And I know that innocent human beings created in God's own image are suffering in Gaza right now at the hand of policies that make a mockery of our Jewish history, tradition, and trauma. And I know that we cannot look away. And aside from all of that, I know that our most audacious dreams are born in the dark. And this, friends, is the dark. And so we must grieve, and we must speak the truth, and we must act. This is the moment to reaffirm our commitment to the dream of a just and peaceful and flourishing future for everyone. The moment to recommit to the fight for the dignity of every human life. Shabbat Shalom.